Everyone. Today is our meeting of August 10, and our first item of business. It will immediately put the lie to what Paki just told you about not having any votes. We're going to vote on approval of the minutes. So if everyone has had a chance to look at those, please unmute your microphones, and I'll accept a motion to approve them.
Mr. Chair, Brian Keeley, I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Brian.
Mr. Chairman, John Holden, I second.
Thank you, John. Very well. Is there any discussion or corrections that we need to make note of before we vote? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Chris Schmaltz, aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Motion passes. Today's meeting is going to be our first jump into the deep end of the projects which are going to be provided to us, have been provided to us from most of the jurisdictions through the Technical Management Committee. We'll continue to look at these over the next few months, and as we ask for and TMC refines some of the information, we'll continue to revisit these. We're not sure how far through this list we'll get today, but if we don't make it all the way through, we'll certainly pick it up again at our next meeting. So in order to get the process going, I'd like to see if Rick Ellis could give us a bit of an overview before we start to jump into all the projects that we're going to be reviewing. Mr. Ellis.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you all for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you again. As the chair mentioned, I do want to give a little background information. We will be going through and doing a fairly broad-based high clip review of the projects, but I want to kind of take the next few minutes to shape the framework, to kind of give you some perspective, background, and to kind of lay the overall groundwork for moving forward, just so you'll be able to have an idea of kind of what's been done to date and what the overall steps moving forward will be. First and foremost, kind of an overview of the steps that are involved, what's been done. The key things to remember through all this is that this is a citizen-led effort, and that this process, the steps, and everything that's being done reflects that. It will also highlight then the iterative and collaborative nature that's going to take place between the CAC and the TMC. So the first steps that have taken place on this, the initial list of the proposed projects was submitted by the TMC. Those came in at the tail end of June. Since then, PAG staff had gone through, done a review and initial assessment, provided a summary document that was then shared with the TMC, and then also presented again at the meeting on July 22nd. The highlights of that included a review of the scope, some of the preliminary cost information, and kind of an evaluation of some of the key things that will need to be looked for. That was relying mostly on that TMC recognizing their technical oversight. Now, as we present the projects to you, we're going to be sharing the draft scope, preliminary cost information, and evaluation of how the projects align with the CAC goals, and Paki will be leading us through that effort here in just a little bit. Once we complete those reviews, then the jurisdictions are going to have the opportunity to review, revise, and refine the details based on the TMC and CAC input. Any direction or guidance is going to be provided on that as well. That'll conclude with the TMC finalizing the recommended list of candidate projects and then providing that back to the CAC. At that point in time, PAG's technical team will do a much more detailed analysis and what we call a deep dive into the basic parameters, including the scope, the cost, and the overall performance. So this is where the team will go into a much higher level of detail, getting into some of the weeds on the nuances and making sure that all the key elements are going to be captured, identified, and included. Last but not least, then, that will culminate with the CAC and TMC prioritizing the projects that will ultimately become part of the fiscally constrained plan. You'll note that there are no timeframes associated with this, no specific dates, no specific durations. That's meant to be so that we can introduce the flexibility, the nimbleness that'll be necessary in the process, so that we can adjust to the input, feedback, as well as any changes to the projects, additions, subtractions, or revisions that'll be needed, as well as the public input feedback. So this slide was included in the packet of information that was provided to you in advance of the meeting. And this essentially, if it looks familiar, it is the basic template or the framework, if you will, of the existing RTA plan, and will serve then as the starting ground for what the format and the basic game plan will look like as we go forward on this. You'll note that there are very few details in there. This is the starting point. The focus of our efforts, as Tom alluded to in his opening comments, we're focusing on the named projects at this time. So as you look at the left-hand side of the slide and then up to the top, that'll highlight what will be the named projects, which will include descriptions, the anticipated budget and cost, any additional revenues, as well as a time frame of when that can expect it to go. The categorical items or the other elements that will be included, those are still to be there's still a lot of work to be done on those. Those efforts will be coming at a later date and time, and those are still ongoing discussions that are occurring with you and the various presentations that you've heard over the last several months and will continue to hear as we move forward. So a little bit more information on the review assessment that was performed by PAG staff. The summary table and the listing and the scope, that's been provided to you, and I'll go over that here in a little bit more. And then obviously, as Paki leads us through the effort, you'll get to see a little bit more of the details surrounding each project. But the information that was presented to TMC focused primarily on the scope elements, making sure that are all the elements properly captured and incorporated. Were there any adjustments that were needed to look at either the links or connection points or logical termini? In addition, we also took a look at the cost estimate, not necessarily to do any kind of deep analysis or refined evaluation, but more or less just to identify areas that might serve as a heads up, a concern. They may be subject to volatility in the markets, or they may have been items that are traditionally underrepresented or underestimated on past efforts. And we just want to make sure we have proper eyes and ears on those and that we have proper attention given to those elements. Also, there was a discussion about project performance, the evaluation, and the desired outcomes. You've heard Paul Casertano talk an awful lot about that, and so the project performance is going to be one of the elements that we'll be focusing on as we do our deeper dive later in the overall process. And the key thing is to make sure that the proposed improvements are all tying in with the system and that they provide the necessary transportation improvements and benefits for the whole region. So I'm going to spend some time on this table. While this represents a summary, there are a number of things I want to highlight on this. This is basically a financial summary of all the projects that have been submitted to date. And a few things here that I want to highlight for you. You'll see, working from kind of a left to right format, and first and foremost, you'll note that it covers periods 5, 6, and 7. I'm going to speak more to that here in a little bit, but because of the nature and the time frame of where we're at, period 4, which is where that's under the current plan, is under the purview and responsibility of the board with oversight provided by the CART committee. I'll talk more about that in the upcoming slides, but the focus here is on the new revenue, thus the new projects associated with the new plan. That's why it focuses on periods 5, 6, and 7. At the far left, you'll note that that breaks across the classifications of the various roadways, covering from interstate and freeway, both classifications of the arterial system, both classifications of the collector system. The road that's listed as TBD is a designation that we came up with, and essentially it includes projects that are on brand new alignments, of which there are a number of, so there's no existing roadway there that would provide any kind of the base information. That also includes projects where the classification fell below those of a minor collector, so we don't have a whole lot of collected information at that point in time, or projects that were of single scope, single purpose, single focus. So we'll be highlighting those as we go along through there. So this is kind of a way of categorizing them, showing where the projects lie, how they spread across the various regional classifications through the roadway network here in the region. Couple other key things that are important to note. You'll notice that the total project costs, so if you go across and further to the right, total number of projects, we are currently sitting at 80. So yes, that's a substantial number. You can think of this as instead of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, this is RTA and the 80 little projects. So there's going to be a significant amount of work there that'll be needed done. If you come back and look at the all period totals, the funding request currently stands at approximately $2.3 billion. However, we do know that there are several projects in there that have placeholders, may be adjusted, may be refined. So it's entirely possible that number can expect to go up. So that'll show the significant challenge that's ahead of the CAC as we move forward with all this. It also includes the row that's RTA revenue, and you can see that we expect probably about $500 million for every period, culminating approximately $1.5 billion available for the 3 periods that we're working on. That's for the entire plan, not just the named projects. So recognizing that the remaining portions, the other elements or the categoricals still needs to be developed. That'll be something to keep in mind, that we right now are far and exceed of the revenue that has been anticipated.
Quick question, if I may.
Please.
Those
who's
dollar
speaking?
amounts are, John Holden, those numbers are thousands of dollars, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, I thought maybe we got a really big discount on something there, but no. It wasn't stated on, it wasn't on the form there. I just wanted to make sure if that I was reading that correctly.
Yes, you are correct that these are in the thousands of dollars.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Hey, Rick,
Yes, go
can
ahead.
I pull you back just 30 seconds, just to be sure people caught a couple of the things that you mentioned. One being that several of the projects are placeholders. You may want to explain that means that there's no revenue associated with them yet, or no costs yet. So that's one reason it would go up. And then also the City of Tucson projects, which have not shown up yet.
So that's correct. At this point in time, this represents the projects that have been submitted. We know there are still some more coming. We do expect that there will be some that get revised as we go along. By placeholder, one of the projects that we probably won't get into in today's presentation, but it is included in the overall list, is on the Sonoran Corridor. And at this point in time, the Arizona Department of Transportation is the lead jurisdiction for that project. They are going through the review and evaluation of the environmental impact statement. And until that document gets published for the public and the draft is available then for public review and comment, that point in time, we can introduce now more definitive submittals. But until then, needs to represent that any kind of build alternative or specific alternative has not yet been made public.
Mr. Chairman, Bruce Wright, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, Bruce, go ahead.
Rick, the dollar amount for our new RTA revenue, the 1.465 billion, that presumes a half-cent tax. Is that correct?
That is correct. That's based on the direction from the board to maintain a current half-cent limit right now.
Thank you.
Assumed at this point in time. There's a lot to digest on this. So are there any other questions before I move forward? Or we can come back to that. I did allow some time before Pocky begins the project review session, so we can come back on this if you want to see the rest of it, and then table any questions for the time being. Okay, hearing none. I talked a little bit about the overlap, and then I want to hit upon this in a little bit more information and detail as it relates to period 4. So if the RTA, assuming right now, as we know, it's a 20-year plan with 20-year tax revenue. The implementation of the current plan at the rate it is the responsibility of the board, with oversight coming from the CART committee. I believe the chair of the CART had provided a letter to the chair of the CAC, and that is part of your packet that was shared with you. The development of the draft plan then is the responsibility of the CAC, with the interaction and the collaboration of the TMC. In this particular scenario, It's based on, if we assume a 2025 election, essentially the second plan or the new plan would then butt up against the first one. And essentially it transitions smoothly from one to the other. And that's assuming a 2025 election. If there's any kind of gap in there, same thing happens, and there's just a time frame in between the two. The key takeaways on this that are important: the current plan is under the purview of the board and the CART committee, with the responsibility for the new plan with the CAC working collaboratively with TMC. So in a situation where we have no overlap, those two butt up seamlessly together with one another. However, if we do introduce a situation and an assumption for this particular slide is that if an election were held in 2021, and that's only for example purposes only, I cannot stress that enough, that there are no dates, timelines, or election dates have been established at any point in time. This is only for illustrative purposes. The new sales tax revenue, the new revenue would kick in July of 2026, and that applies to periods 5, 6, and 7, which constitute the new plan. The overlap with period 4 is under the responsibility and authority of the board, with the CART committee then providing the citizen oversight. So that's why period 4 projects have been why the table focuses on periods 5, 6, and 7. Those constitute the new projects at this point in time. Now, if the election were held, say in 2023, 2024, the overlap would be adjusted accordingly until whatever point in time, 2026.
Hey, Rick.
Yes.
Just one last clarification about this overlap. This is assuming that the new 20-year plan is a half-cent sales tax, just as the current one is a half-cent. And so
that is
if
correct.
2022 or 21, there is an approval by the electorate, it would still be for the continuation essentially of that half-cent. If, however, the electorate votes for more than a half-cent, and we know that there's legislative authority to increase it up to even 1 full cent, any of the amounts over the existing half-cent essentially would become new revenues to be administered during the overlap period.
If you think of new revenue, it would equate to new projects. So essentially the new revenue then becomes under the auspice of the CAC, unless the board imposes new revenues specifically at their direction, guidance, or however they want to implement that.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay.
This does assume a continuation of that, but there is that legislative authority that would allow for that increase. And the increase goes along with the new projects as part of the new plan.
Right on.
Any other questions on this? I know this is, it kind of seems a little bit more complicated, but if you simply remember to think of the two basics: current plan under the purview of the board with CART oversight, new plan, new revenue under the auspice of the CAC with TMC collaboration and iterative efforts. And then that helps then the rest of the overlap is just identifying whatever time frame is going to be appropriate and how that lines up with the development of the draft plan.
This is Arlen, Rick.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Thanks. Just to so I make sure I understand, the point is here that there's potentially an overlap between the approval of the new revenue for the new projects at the same time that the older ones are being wrapped up under period 4 is what is. So I'm assuming that not indicated in here is that, well, we've run out of money in period 4 under the old system, and now that's got to cover because there were project overruns, and then the new plan has to cover an element of what was in period 4. Is that, I'm assuming that's not the case, or is it the case?
I want to make sure I understand what you're asking, Arlen, so give me a second. The Any revenue adjustments that would be needed for the period 4 efforts would then be the responsibility and authority of the board to make that determination. And right now, I think for purposes of our discussion, the new plan, new revenue would focus on, I'm sorry, the new revenue would focus on the new plan going forward.
Okay.
Did I answer your question? If I
Yes,
got to
that-
what I think, okay,
Exactly it.
Hey,
Thank you.
okay.
Rick, just following up on that a little bit, during the overlap period, there's no revenue for the new 20-year plan being generated because the half-cent sales tax is all still part of RTA 1. So does that mean then, assuming that's the case, that in your period, in your graphic here, where it says new elements with new revenue, that would only be, instead of 20 years of revenue, which we came up with $1.5 billion, you would really only have 16 years of new revenue to fund those new projects. So have you looked at what happens to the revenue, and can you or Farhad maybe talk to us about what happens to those projects that can't be funded then because of a shorter period of time to collect revenues for them?
Farhad, did that make more sense to you, or do you want to weigh in?
I'll be happy to, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. So another way to look at it is on an annual basis, roughly, there's $100 million of revenue collected on the half-cent sales tax. So regardless of how many years those overlap years are, currently we're assuming, based on this illustration, there's a 5-year overlap. During those 5 years, $500 million roughly will be collected. That $500 million is committed to delivering the current voter-approved RTA plan. As soon as we slide and reduce that overlap to 3 years or 2 years or less, then assume that annual $100 million. So there's, let's say there's a 2-year overlap, there's $200 million. That $200 million as it is committed to RTA plan that is currently being implemented. As you can imagine, those commitments have to be fulfilled. That revenue is committed to those projects. Again, the previous scenario that Rick was talking about was assuming there's no overlap. If there is no overlap, then all those commitments have been met. Therefore, there's additional revenue available for new programming. So the overlap, you just want to kind of give you a taste of it with this example, but that's really the mechanics of it, the financial responsibility, and the board will determine how they meet their commitment on the current plan and make sure the overlap is well defined. So that's really more of a financial exercise at that point.
Did that address your questions, Tom, between the two of us?
Yeah, essentially, the better way to look at this than a $1.5 billion plan is a $100 million per year plan that will start working as soon as 2026 rolls around, and until whatever the termination date of RTA Next is, and it'll go as far as it can go.
That is correct. So again, if you look at the previous example with 26 being the start of the new 20-year plan, then that would be roughly $2 billion. With 2022 being the start of the plan, then that's where you got to the 1.5 for the 3 new periods. Again, we'll try to hopefully continue to have this conversation. So from a financial perspective, there's got to be a balancing and closing of the current plan and moving into the new plan, and that's the exercise. And as you said, Mr. Chair, $100 million a year is really the ballpark to look at. So depending on which year the new plan starts, you slide the 100 million one way or the other.
So let me, this is Arlen, follow-up question. So it makes logical sense then to not hold an early election, to hold it somewhere close to when the period begins, because you're collecting 100 million over 20 years. That overlap means you're really collecting the same money from period 4, and you're not adding new money into the new 20-year plan because it's already covered under the other, given that it's a half-cent sales tax, and we're never going to be collecting money from Plan 1 and at the same time new money from Plan 2. It's the same money. Does that make sense? Am I right, or am I confused?
So again, Mr. Chair, the revenue is half-cent, roughly $100 million annually, regardless of which plan we're in. So that's why it's the RTA board's decision, and it's their policy to decide at what point we go for an election. So they're going to have to consider all these policy decisions. So the purpose of an overlap is, again, purely a financial exercise, making sure that you complete your commitments on the current plan and you start your new commitments on the new plan. Regardless of whether it's 1 year or 5 years, you still have to go through that exercise, which is more administrative exercise, to close the books on one plan and start the books on the new plan. So again, that is purely a policy issue and up to the board, and we'll be happy to let you know when the board decides to have that conversation and give you more information.
Mr. Chair, this is Chris Schmaltz.
Go ahead, Chris.
I'm interested, and I guess I'm confused by this overlap discussion, because isn't this a function of the question that's asked of the voters? Why would, regardless of when we go to the voters for the election, isn't the question that they would be approving is to adopt a new RTA plan that begins in 2026, which would then grant the authority to impose or extend the existing half-cent sales tax beginning in 2026? That way we get the full 20 years of the new plan. I'm not understanding the overlap conversation, because the question that we're going to the voters on is to extend or adopt essentially the RTA 2, which would then start in 2026.
So, Mr. Chair, again, the timing issue is what we're trying to describe. So, Rick, if you go back to the previous slide. So the previous slide is what you described, that there is no overlap. And if that's the case, then there is no reason to try to create a mechanism to close the books on one plan and start the next plan. That's the only challenge. That's why it's really, from our perspective, if a decision's made to go on a certain date, then we'll come back to you and explain how that's going to be handled. So it's really more of a what if question at this point. The decision may be that we don't go until 26, and therefore it's really not a policy issue at that time. That it purely becomes two plans just back to back and staple the two plans together. If there is an overlap, we have to address it, and that's the main reason we're bringing that up, just so you all understand. If there's an overlap, it will be addressed, and obviously we'll come back to you and discuss how it needs to be addressed.
Well, this is Chris again, Mr. Chair. Is that overlap sort of issue a function of the way the statute's written, or if the question is asked of the voters that says, do you approve of the new RTA 2, which is set to begin in 2026, which then there is no overlap. Then it doesn't go into effect until 2026, regardless of when the election for the voters is. It could be in 2022 or 2024 or 2025. But if the question says RTA 2 begins 2026, that's what and gives the authority to impose the new half-cent sales tax beginning in 2026, then it begins in 2026. That's the authorization from the voters. Isn't that what would happen?
Yes, that is one scenario, and that is a board decision. They need to make that determination, make that decision. So this is the perfect scenario, and we hope that as we move forward, that's the scenario that you're gonna hopefully work on. But we just want to make sure everybody understands what happens if there is an overlap, and that's why we don't like to get into what if questions, because it may confuse people. So perfect situation would be that there is no overlap, and this is the scenario that we're hoping to develop.
Very good. Any other questions for Rick?
This is Carol, and I do have a question. I mean, because this is kind of confusing. I want to follow up on that question. Is if we had an election in 2022 or whatever, we could ask the voters to approve another half-cent sales tax so we can start the new 20-year plan early, but still have the old half-cent sales tax in the overlap period. And that, in that sense, we would have a full penny, because we've already told the voters that we're going to use the money that was collected through 2026 that the voters approved of in 2006 for this plan. So that could be asked of the voters too, an additional half-cent sales tax so we can start this one 4 years early, and it's still, or before 2026 anyway, and it would go the full 20 years. Is that something that's even on the, like, in the realm of possibilities?
So again, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, there are many different scenarios, and that would be one scenario. And the best way to look at it, if there's new revenue, then we're able to program new projects. So regardless of how or which scenario we move forward with, it's really a function of new revenue. So our focus should be on how much is the new revenue. Let's project the new revenue based on different scenarios, and then have the conversation of how do you develop a program to spend those new revenues. So we'll come back to this. And again, we were hoping that discussing this overlap wasn't going to confuse people, but unfortunately, again, it's something that is more of a what if, and there are many different scenarios. So we'd rather not get into all these what if different scenarios and really focus on new revenue. If there's new revenue, how are you going to program the new revenue? And then we'll at some point need to come back and give you the target dollar amount. And that's a policy decision. The board needs to make a decision. What is the target for the new revenue? And then we can have all these programs fall in place at that time.
I think to add to that, if there's a takeaway, it's just to remember that the current plan, everything that's under current plans efforts right now, managed by the board and the CART committee. And so we're only dealing with here with this CAC and its interactions with TMC for the new revenue, new portions of the plan. And they overlap. The time frame is just, well, I want to make sure that we're reflecting periods 5, 6, and 7 to acknowledge that. That's the main takeaway on these.
Just the last comment on it, because we told the voters that that half-cent was going to the current RTA, then if we go early, it seems like it doesn't matter about policies at the RTA board. It has to be new revenue for the new plan, and there would be more money, not the same amount of money, because we already told the voters that's what we're doing. We never said that the RTA board was going to reprogram this half-cent sales tax when we come back early. So I think we do need to talk about this more, not right now, but we really need to get a sense of all this, because I want to continue to keep our promise to the voters.
Correct,
So
and
again,
that's been echoed in a number of forums with documentation provided by board chair, CART chair, as well as the various other committee chairs too.
Very good. Thanks, Rick. And
I know it's complicated. We'll
apologize.
definitely, yeah, it was just meant to acknowledge the difference in why the summary sheet that I'd previously shown you only included periods 5, 6, and 7. We'll make sure we clarify that as we go forward.
Very good. Thanks.
The last little bit of review process, just to continue the wrapping up the overview, then obviously your committee's efforts and the focus here is going to be to review the name projects. Once again, categoricals and the sub-elements will be coming at a later date and time. But right now, the key thing that Paki will be leading us through is just to simply get a understanding of the scope, what the intent of the project and the improvements that are included, and then obviously how it aligns with the adopted goals, and then be able to provide input, feedback back to the TMC as the refinement process goes forward. So we can expect that'll be iterative and will not happen instantly, I'm sure. So before Paki jumps into the project effort and leads us through that, I know there are questions along the way, but is there any other questions, anything else you want to go back to, or anything else I didn't cover?
Mr. Chairman, this is Bruce Wright again.
Okay, Bruce.
So as we move forward, and Rick, you said that it is likely that the number of projects and the dollar requirements for that are going to exceed the revenue projections based on a 0.5-cent tax. As we proceed, is it possible for us to understand what the implications would be if we were to raise it to, say, 3/4 of a cent or a full cent? Can we see how then projects roll into that revenue stream, so that we have some understanding about whether or not that should be a consideration in taking a higher request to the voters, and what the implications are for the various projects?
Basically, you just want to see what those scenario revenues would be. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think as we start to sort through projects, our ability to understand, if we had additional revenue, we would be able to consider additional projects or whatever. And understanding that, it seems to me, would inform the decision about what requests we take to the voters for revenue.
So we will get into those kinds of scenarios as we get further down the road. But for now, our call is to look for another 0.5 cent and see what we would propose under that 0.5 cent. Once we have that plan together, if we decide to recommend to the board a higher amount, that of course is their decision. But in the meantime, we really need to focus on what we do with a 0.5 cent tax for 20 years. And I think Bruce put a placeholder on that conversation, but to begin with, and certainly for the report that we owe the board, we have to give them a 0.5 cent sales tax plan. And then if we have further recommendations about spending more and what that would do if they did, in other words, raise to 3/4 of a cent as you threw out, then that would be kind of an appendix, if you will, to or a second recommendation that we'd make to the board at that time.
To add to that, Mr. Chair, and Bruce, as you go along, if you think about it in the big math that Farhad described, essentially a 0.5 cent tax generates about $100 million a year. Then you can prorate based off of that. 1/4 of that would generate in the range of $50 million a year. It's not exact, but it would give you a ballpark of what those target amounts could possibly be.
Yeah, and I understand that. I guess I'm just concerned that as we move forward through these projects and look at the jurisdictional submissions, we're going to have to make some hard choices, and there may be some projects that we really see critical that can't fit into the existing budget or revenue projections. We keep those in mind so that we can then make a recommendation to the board about considering additional revenue as part of the voter ask. That's all I'm talking about.
And I think to your end, as the refinement process comes along, obviously we're starting at a very high clip, high level at this point in time, but as that gets further along, the project lists are modified, adjusted, if some are removed or others are added, then the ability to go into higher level of detail, either in some cases it may be expected cost information or the revenue projections, we expect we'll be able to provide that to help facilitate those discussions as well. So we do expect that down the line, probably not at the first cut of 80, but we do know at some point in time, we're gonna have to have some intermediate information discussions and a little bit more refined numbers to play with.
Thank you.
This is Arlen again, with a follow-up.
Okay.
So, and using the chart that's in front of us, again, but it does go back to the overlap issue. I understand periods 5, 6, and 7 of the new plan. But if this is a 20-year extension, then I would assume that we are collecting revenues for the 20-year period, which means that from the years 2040, fiscal year 2042 to 2047, there's still $100 million a year being collected based on a half-cent basis. It's just not able to be spent during the period that we're funding these things, because it takes a long time to build these things. But where is that other money? Where is that other 5 years worth of $100 million relative to this charter? How does that project in here? If, and I realize this is assuming that there's an overlap, but if it's, again, getting back to Carolyn's question, if it's an overlap of 5 years, then we're really, then it reads like we're funding 5 years. We're really not funding that first 5 years unless we're doing what Carolyn suggested and collecting a double count in that first 5 years if there's an overlap, which is as Farhad said, is a possibility. It's one of the scenarios, but it's not the only scenario. So
or unless you do as Chris suggested and have the voters approve it starting in 26. So again, guys, there's a lot of different scenarios about how this can play out. Let's just focus on what a 20-year plan could produce, and we'll go from there.
This is Dale Calvert. Just one other quick question is where it fits in this whole discussion is there's been some talk about additional maintenance money. Is that off the table at this point, or is that something that's going to be dealt with somewhere down the line? Where are we at with that?
So Dale, this represents only the named projects that have been submitted. So any kind of other categoricals, whether they're going to include maintenance technology or some of the other ones you've heard about, you've only heard basic preliminary presentations on that for education and background. No discussion or no decisions has been made on that. And those will come at a later date and time after we finish drafting and refining the list for the named projects only. So any type of sub-element or categorical element is still to be determined.
Okay.
But it does have to fall under that anticipated revenue level of approximately $1.5 billion. That's got to cover the whole draft plan, which includes whatever categorical items are identified, as well as the named projects.
But once again, just for everyone to remember that 1.465 billion is based upon 15 years of collection, correct, Rick?
That is correct. You are reading that correct.
All right. And so if there were 20 years of collection through
We'd have
whatever
another
scenario
period 8.
possible, then that would be, as Farhad said several minutes ago, close to $2 billion.
That's correct. You would see then a period 8 in there if the two plans didn't have any overlap and essentially butted up with one another.
Right.
Then you would have an 8th period that would represent approximately an average of $500 million income.
Got it. Okay, I want to cut off the overlap conversation for now, and I apologize to the committee for helping stoke these flames, but I promise we'll get back to it at appropriate times. But at this point, it would be, I think, important for us to dive into these projects and would like for Paki and I guess Rick and Paul to take us down through our projects.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to recap, now that Rick has gone over the process overview, but right before we dive into these projects, I just wanted to give you a quick recap. This is going to be a very high-level overview of all the 80 projects that have been submitted to date. And the purpose of this is to provide you with information and to help clarify any questions. Please keep in mind that the projects are submitted and are considered as regional priorities. So for that reason, you'll see when the slides come up, there is no jurisdiction or representative attached to it. These are being looked at as regional priorities. We're going to go through as many projects as possible today. We do have 80 of them, so we'll do the rest. We'll finish the rest at the September meeting. We encourage your input, and we do have staff available to answer any questions as we go through each project. We will answer, as Rick mentioned, the detailed questions, any technical information, any assessment as we get further into the refinement stage. So please keep that in mind. Following today's meeting, the CAC will be given homework on reviewing the goals and the assessment and alignment to those goals for each project. And this will be your homework in preparation for the next meeting in September. You did receive in your packet a goals spreadsheet to help you review the goals and the alignment on your own as we go through. We tried to put the slides in the same order that you received, but some of them have been switched. So please use the key ID number if you have a question about a specific project. Today's presentation, what we did is we grouped the projects by road classification and or by implementation sequence. So that's what we tried to do to help put some clarity into the presentation. And then again, for consistency, I'm going to do a quick overview of each project that was submitted. Rick will go over the scope of work, and then Paul will go over the performance measures for each project. So with that, let's dive in. The first project is Interstate 10 Country Club Road Traffic Interchange. This is an interstate reconstruction project. It's approximately just under 1.5 miles. It is aligned with 5 of the CAC goals, and it has 5 performance measures that need to be addressed. Rick?
So as Paki mentioned, the next several of these projects, and when I say several, it'll probably be in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 of them. They are the individual projects associated with the implementation. The much larger grand effort that's underway is for the I-10 and SR-210 reconstructions, widening, and improvements. So these represent a series of the actual projects that will be implemented under that much larger plan. So the series you're going to see go through, you may notice that they don't quite go from east to west, west to east. There's a little bit of hopping around. That implementation has been identified based on the priority areas that need to be addressed, or stages that would then set the stage for the next piece then to be much more effective, so you get system integration. So as we go through these, just keep in mind these are several building blocks associated with the whole reconstruction effort, from basically I-19 out to Kolb Road and from Golf Links down to I-10. So as Paki mentioned, the first one up is the reconstruction and the implementation of the Country Club Road interchange, as well as then essentially the mainline reconstruction for 3 lanes in each direction, including then all the bridge work at Irvington and Palo Verde Road as well. Paul.
Thank you, Rick. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, good to be with you today. As we go through each of these, it's important to realize that the performance data that we're looking at represents existing condition performance data. We're going to be bringing you through this at a high level, so the technical details and the assessment will come later in the process, but bear in mind, we're looking at existing condition performance. We're not yet at this stage able to provide information related to the project impacts in any of these performance metric areas. So bear that in mind. You'll also see that some of the performance measure elements will be grayed out And that exists where there's no existing condition performance data, or it does not accurately reflect the existing conditions within the majority of the project extent. So bear that in mind as well. And then as you look at each performance measure category, you'll see that they've been grouped into fair, good, poor. That is providing an initial glance at what level of performance of existing condition data, what level that performance is at. So with pavement, for example, we look at the roughness score that's collected on the federal aid network, so the major streets and routes. There will be some facilities where that's not going to be available. Bridge condition is provided by the National Bridge Inventory Dataset that is coordinated with ADOT, and ADOT's reporting to the feds. So we use that data set. For safety, what you'll see, particularly with these interstate projects, you may not see a tremendous amount of safety data. And that's in large part because our safety data is built on a level of safety service, which basically reflects how a roadway segment or intersection is performing in regard to its expected crash frequency and the severity at a specific level of average annual daily traffic. This LOSS approach was not done for ADOT facilities. It was done for the other jurisdictional major streets and routes facilities. And this was due to ADOT pursuing their own safety performance function development for their owned facilities. So there's still safety data there, but it may not show up in this initial screening. When we look at system performance, we're looking at congested intersections, current congestion of roadway, and future roadway congestion. So the congested intersections comes from a traffic signal model, synchro model that's been built for the region. It is a representation of congestion. It doesn't tell you necessarily everything that you might want to know, but it gives you a sense that there's some congestion issues that might be happening at the intersection level. And then the current roadway congestion and future roadway congestion come out of our PAG modeling efforts. So existing condition information is modeled on a regional basis, and then we show where congestion may be evident, as well as with the projects that are contained in the long-range RMAP project set. For sidewalk presence, we're using best available data. So these have been collected over the years for arterials or for collectors and above. And so we're trying to show where there is existing sidewalk presence, what the condition of that sidewalk presence is. As you look through the interstate projects, recognize that, take that with a grain of salt. Your interstate projects aren't always going to be doing sidewalk presence remediation. So bear that in mind as well. And then,
Paul?
Yes.
Excuse me, but could you go back to the congestion future roadway? Just want to
Sure.
confirm that that means without a project. As
That's
opposed
correct. Thanks
to
for that
what a
clarification,
new
Mr. Chair.
project might provide you.
That's right. So the future roadway congestion does represent the 2045 RMAP update no build condition. So we're looking at what would congestion look like without the new set of projects that are being both considered at the RTA Next level, as well as those that are being considered in terms of RMAP update approval. That's also kind of tracking along. So thank you for that. Good clarification there. When we look at environmental impact, we're trying to identify where projects come in contact with environmentally sensitive areas. So we're looking at priority riparian or wildlife corridor. If we see a project extent overlapping areas like that, we designate either high, moderate, or low impact for those particular projects. And then as we look at freight reliability, we're looking at the planning time index value, which indicates an amount of time that should be budgeted for a truck delivery to be on time 95% of the time. So for example, if a PTI value reads 2.0, it shows that 20 minutes should be allowed for a trip that takes 10 minutes under free flow conditions in order to be on time 95% of the time. This is data to be considered. This data doesn't necessarily tell you, aha, I've got the project, it's the one. It's part of the process. It does not dictate the process. So keep that in mind as we go through this.
Thank you, Paul. The next
Hey,
project
Rocky.
is, yeah.
Just a general comment for everyone on the committee. We don't have a cost specifically being presented here, and we understand the reason for that, which was explained to us earlier in the meeting. But I did want to, at least for these I-10 projects, which have traditionally been funded with federal funds and state revenues that typically come from federal gas taxes. Some of the costs for these projects will surely include ADOT funding, as well as whatever may be requested from RTA.
Thanks for pointing that out, Tom.
Mr. Chair, if I may add, so you do have a handout with the cost breakdown. And on your handout, it indicates how much non-RTA funds are provided for each project as well. So that's already broken down in your handout.
Right.
Okay, thank you. The next project is the Interstate 10 Keno Parkway Traffic Interchange Project. Again, another reconstruction interstate project. This one's a little over a mile long. It meets about half of it's aligned with about half of the CAC goals, and it has 6 performance measures that need to be addressed. Rick?
This particular one, this is just to the west of the previous one. So this would be the next stage that would be addressed. And as Paki mentioned, this will widen the existing roadway, reconstruct it, and provide 3 lanes in each direction, including the reconstruction of the structures over Ajo, diversion channel, and then Keno Parkway as well.
Again, we're dealing with existing condition data. So you see some poor performance in maintenance and bridges. So that needs some attention. The safety roadway data recognize that that is picking up some of the local facility content associated with that project boundary. And then we do see some system performance congestion data that's showing up as part of our modeling efforts.
The next project is Interstate 10 Park Avenue Traffic Interchange. Another interstate project. This is a ramp reconstruction. It's about 1.65 miles long. It is aligned with 2 of the CAC goals, and it has 4 performance measures that need to be addressed.
As Paki mentioned, this project continues, moves all the way back to the west end, and this primarily deals now with the operational improvements and enhancements that need to be made to the system to ensure that we get maximum capacity out of it. So it's dealing with ramp configurations, tie-in points, how the flyover configurations, ensuring that everything meets the current standards so that we can maximize the operational capability. This particular stage does not add any mainline lanes to I-10.
Existing condition performance shows pavement needs some attention, certainly. There's some congestion that's showing up in modeling efforts. You will see good congestion at the intersection level. Recognize that's picking up some of the signalized intersections associated with existing facilities, not necessarily the interstate related system performance.
Next, we have Interstate 10 6th Avenue Traffic Interchange. This is another interstate widening project. It's just under a mile in length. It's aligned with 2 of the CAC goals, and it has 3 performance measures that need to be addressed.
This particular stage now addresses the congestion related at the overall interchange and focuses on the cross street, 6th Avenue, and essentially adds the necessary turning lanes so that you have the throughput capacity for mainline 6th Avenue, but you'll also have turning capability to ensure that the overall functionality of the interchange is compatible with the rest of the system, both 6th Street as well as then the mainline I-10. So while it doesn't add any lanes necessarily to Interstate 10 with this particular stage, it addresses the necessary congestion relief at that interchange.
Existing condition performance data shows pavement needs some attention again. The safety roadway data, recognize that's picking up some of the local facility content around the project area. And modeling is showing that there is some future roadway congestion in this area to be considered.
Interstate 10, Alvernon Way to Valencia Road. This is another interstate reconstruction project. It's about a little over 2 miles long. This one is aligned with 5 of the CAC goals, and it has 3 performance measures that need to be addressed.
This portion, this next stage of the project, the overall implementation now moves further back down to the east of the country club area, and focuses on the ultimate configuration connections that will be associated with the Alvernon Way and SR 210. I'll talk about those stages in the upcoming slides, and then continues the main line widening as well as structure replacement as it gets down to and ties into the Valencia Road interchange.
So existing condition performance data shows your pavement's getting to a place where it's going to need some attention soon. Good to keep an eye on that. Congestion issues are showing up in the modeling process for current roadway network as well as future roadway network.
The Interstate 10, Interstate 19 to Aquino Parkway project is an interstate widening project. It's almost 1.5 miles in length. It aligns with 5 of the CAC goals, and it has 4 performance measures that need to be addressed.
If you feel like you're playing a game of whack-a-mole, that's kind of the way to think about this, because you're really trying to chase different areas, different improvements, but it all does come together and ensures that the previous components that are built all then now are effectively integrated. So essentially this project moves down to the west end after the mainline reconstruction has taken place. The interchanges have been improved, the ramps have been put in place, and the mainline widening has been in effect. And now this goes back towards the west end and starts carrying forward the 4-lane widening section so that you'll have a total of 8 lanes as you work your way up to the Keno interchange.
Perhaps strategic whack-a-mole in the sequence of the projects. Recognize that the existing condition data shows only those existing conditions for the project extent. So there are issues that exist along the corridor that need to be considered, certainly. But what's provided for you here today is what existing conditions lie within the project extent. So we see poor pavement showing up, and then future roadway congestion. Your current roadway congestion's okay, but it's not fantastic. So some issues to deal with. And again, you're looking at full corridor improvement. So this gives you project area, but realize there's more behind it.
John Holden with a question on that.
Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The 19 to Keno expansion and such like that, the work to be done on 6th Avenue, will that be planning for this section as well? In other words, if you're going to widen the bridge over the top of at 6th Avenue, you're going to push the approaches back if needed, and that sort of thing, so we don't have to build it twice.
Exactly correct. That would be done so that each subsequent stage ties in with the one that was previously done, and they accommodate and all slip together. So perfectly described.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Next one is State Route 210, Stage 1. This is the principal arterial project. It's the first of 3 stages. It goes from Palo Verde to Aqua Way. It's 1.3 miles in length. It aligns with 4 of the CAC goals, and it has 4 performance measures that need to be addressed.
Reconstruction effort on I-10. I-10 operates as what we could designate as a full access control type of interstate or freeway system. This is obviously going to be a substantial project, and this is the first stage now that kicks in on the SR 210 expansion. And as Paki described, it includes a lot of the ramp and connectivity work, with golf links, Alvernon, all the necessary connection points, and then the first portion to Ajo Way. So this is really laying the groundwork for what would be referred to as a system interchange at the very north end, and making sure that all the points of connection are essentially laid out and integrated.
So the existing condition data may not tell you everything you want to know about the improvement project, but it gives you perspective of what's out there right now on the facilities that have been built. So you need to address poor pavement. There appear to be some safety issues and some intersection congestion issues that the project will likely address on the whole.
State Route 210 Stage 2, this is the freeway project, and this is the second of the 3 stages. It goes also from Palo Verde to Ajo Way. It's 1.3 miles in length, is aligned with 4 of the CAC goals, and has 4 performance measures that need to be addressed.
Why this ties in, so I mentioned the previous stage project is going to focus on a lot of the ramp connections. This would complete those and then start in on the main line construction, the conversion from Alvernon Way as what you know as an at grade or a typical roadway that we'd see around the region to more of a freeway type facility. Limited access provided only at interchanges that will be reconstructed. The number of lanes there that was reflected, that represents also including some connection lanes. Those are all necessary as well. Meets all the future traffic demands though, and accommodates all the necessary capacity needs.
So
Quick question for both Paul
Oh, yeah.
and Rick. Could you imagine that this is perhaps a good way for the committee to look at projects over their lifetimes? In other words, State Route 210 is shown even on our information here as a principal arterial, and this is I think, ultimately planned expansion to full freeway, you know, from 25, 30 years ago, in a progression from a 2-lane roadway to a 4-lane divided and then on to freeway. Something that you would anticipate seeing as a progression of improvements for certain projects like the Sonoran Corridor?
I think that would be reasonable to expect that those will happen. Well, I think what we're trying to do is paint the picture of what the ultimate configuration and the scope of improvements are. And you are correct that there are some that will evolve from what you currently see today, this being the most notable and will have a different characteristic in its future build-out condition.
Yeah, I guess my only point was that they've been identified from the beginning of these routes as ultimately stepping up in size, I guess, and in function as traffic congestion and need increases, as might be predicted.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. You are correct that the nature and the evolution on some of these, while it's been designated or carried that connotation for quite a while, the upgraded level or the different classification or the change in its type of operation and configuration does fall into what some of these have been in place or envisioned for decades. It's just now the time has come around when the need finally meets the demand.
Yeah, I just bring it up for the committee's thoughts that at some point, you know, we'll have to have conversations about freeways and non-freeways and natural evolution, I guess, of certain types of roadway systems. But sorry to take up your time. Go back to what you were talking about.
Tom, this is Arlen.
Yes.
I have a question. This is a general question, but it's now, it keeps going through my mind as I'm seeing all of these highway projects here. Is at some point in this there a independence and dependency analysis that's done that if you don't do this project here, then this other project doesn't make any sense? Or are all of these considered independent? It sounds like they're more dependent on making the whole system work flawlessly. But I'm just wondering about the degree of independence versus dependency. And I know that that wouldn't be done now, but whether that's going to be done in the future. The second question is, and I'm not sure this is the case, but if there was another project, let's say a new project like Sonoran Corridor, that takes some of the traffic off of these particular areas, is that also analyzed so that you can compare the two?
So I'll answer your first question. The projects we're running through, they are specifically associated with the I-10 and SR210 improvements, basically going from I-19 to Kolb Road. You are correct in that they are dependent. These, while they're independent, while they're specific individual projects, they are part of an overall system implementation that has been developed and is coming up on the final stages of its environmental documentation process with its design concept, and thus ready to move forward to the next step of detailed design, right-of-way activities, some of the same things I've talked to you about previously. So all these projects associated with this portion of I-10 and SR210 are a connected and integrated part of that overall scope of improvements.
So they're
Paul talked to your second thing as to how the modeling situation and how various improvements are assumed when the evaluation is done for individual projects and how it connects in with the rest of the system. Paul, that might be better suited for you as your modeling exercises that are done under a future build condition.
Sure, Mr. Chair, Arlen, you'll recognize that some of the existing condition performance data is explicitly focused on the project extent, while some of the modeling efforts take the whole network into account and attempt to identify where current roadway congestion might exist and future roadway congestion might exist. So those look at it largely in more of a network context, while some of the others look at the features within the project and what condition those features are in. I should also say that we're looking at best available data here, and we're trying to standardize a regional performance measure approach so that it gives us an ongoing ability to look at project extents prior to consideration, during construction, after construction. And then we anticipate that there would be additional data that would be brought either through the design concept report or the project before and after evaluation that we could supplement this standardized data to discover a little bit more about what the project impact complexities are.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on to State Route 210, Stage 3. This is again a principal arterial. This is the third and final stage of this particular State Route 210 project. It's from Ahaway to I-10. It's a little over a mile in length, and it does align with 4 of the CAC goals, and it does have 5 performance measures that need to be addressed.
So this is the final stage of 210, and as I mentioned in one of the earlier sections from Alvernon to Valencia on mainline I-10, this basically connects the pieces. All the ramp connections are made, the necessary improvements at Ajo Interchange are made, and then essentially make sure everything all ties together with what are termed as system interchanges, where essentially you're kind of going from one freeway system to the next freeway system.
Existing condition performance data shows poor pavement condition within the project extent. The intersection and roadway safety poor performance, recognize that's likely picking up some of the local facilities. It'll be a different concept to address safety within this type of facility, but recognizing that there are safety issues there is important. And then we see some poor intersection congestion performance associated with the signalized intersections in the project.
The next one is Interstate 10 Valencia Road Traffic Interchange. This is another interstate reconstruction project. It's just under a mile in length. It aligns again with 4 of the CAC goals, and it has 5 performance measures that need to be looked at.
So now the projects, the stages bring back to Interstate 10, moving on to the next one. And this continues the widening out to a 6-lane configuration with all the necessary ramp connections, interchange modifications, frontage road improvements to ensure the fully connected roadway system, and continues marching from the west to the east.
Existing condition performance data does show that you've got some poor bridge condition to deal with. Recognize that the system maintenance bridge performance measure doesn't necessarily show you where you may need expansion of a bridge. It just shows you the condition of the bridge and what that ranking is. So there could be capacity issues associated with bridge replacement. So poor bridges is not exactly equal to you need to replace it. You may need to do some work on the bridge. You could also see good bridge condition where you still need to replace the bridge and expand its capacity.
Interstate 10, Craycroft Road traffic interchange, another interstate reconstruction project, little over a mile in length, aligns with 4 of the CAC goals, and has 4 performance measures that need to be addressed.
So continuing with the next piece, these are all bite-sized project elements that can be tackled, bolted together, ensure the overall system comes together, as I continue to stress that. This is the next one in line where it continues the 6-lane widening along with the interchange reconstruction now at Craycroft Road.
Again, existing condition bridge issues are showing up. You also see some system performance issues from efforts for both current roadway and future roadway. So it looks like there's some attention that needs to be focused in this area.
This is Arlen again. Paul, just a quick question on that one. Why would this freeway have good sidewalk presence versus the other ones?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Arlen, I'm both happy and anxious that you asked that question. It's a good question, and we're going to have to look at it. So I'm not quite sure, but the content is captured within the buffer that you see in that area. So I imagine there's some capture of some existing sidewalk presence, but we would need to pull up the platform and take a closer look as to why that might be the case. I'm kind of at a loss
Little
with
red
that.
flag. Thanks.
Interstate 10, Wilmot Road traffic interchange. Another reconstruction on I-10, a little over 1 mile. It is aligned with 4 of the CAC goals, and it has 4 performance measures that need to be addressed.
I promise we'll stop when we smell the ocean, but as Paki said, continuing the next mile to the east and then tackling the Wilmot interchange, continuing with the main line widening and progressing on those set of improvements.
Ocean, what ocean? It's 103 degrees outside. So, when you look at the existing condition performance data, you see some issues that are raising their head here. So certainly some attention needs to be put on bridge condition and pavement. And then there's some safety issues around the project area, and then some congestion issues that are showing up for the future conditions.
And another Interstate 10, Culp Road traffic interchange. Interstate 10 reconstruction, almost 2.5 miles in length, aligns with 4 of the CAC goals, and it has 4 performance measures that need to be addressed.
Now, this is the final mainline segment, but I'll come back on that because there's going to be enhancements with future projects here. But this is the one that then completes the segment from I-19 out to Culp Road. The significance of this last piece, in addition to continuing the mainline widening and then matching back into existing, is that Culp Road would be reconfigured into what's called a diverging diamond interchange. It's the same configuration that is being implemented on the Houghton Road interchange that started construction recently. So it's just a different type of configuration, allows for a maximized traffic maneuver, help address congestion issues, things like that.
Existing condition performance data shows pavement issues that are raising, and some of the congestion issues are showing up in the modeling efforts for both current conditions as well as future conditions. No bill.
Now we're moving into Interstate 10, Elvernon Way to Craycroft Road, Phase 1. This is an interstate, one of two phases. It's a widening. It's about 3 miles in length, and it aligns with only 2 of the CAC goals, and it has 5 performance measures that need to be looked at.
Now, as I mentioned, these individual projects are part of the overall system improvements to Interstate 10 and to 210. And now these are the subsequent stages. So after the main line's been reconstructed to provide the extra lanes in each direction, bringing the total up to 6, or back further towards the west in terms of 8. This now recognizes that due to as traffic grows, increases, volumes change, this looks ahead to a future point in time where main line will now need to be widened and add an extra lane in each direction, then bringing it up for a total of 8. So it addresses future demand, future capacity, future congestion. To the question that had been raised earlier, do these all get built with the future in mind so that there's only one, basically hit it once and don't have to reconstruct everything? And the answer is that's correct. That's the exact way to look at it. All these would then bolt on as necessary improvements without undoing any of the previous improvements.
Existing condition performance data does show that you have some congestion issues to address. So that goes right in hand with what Rick is discussing. There's also some bridge conditions to be addressed, and fair pavement that continues to not get better every day.
This project is similar to the one we just saw, but it's another Phase 1 from Craycroft Road to Kolb Road on Interstate 10. It's one of 2 phases, also a widening. It's almost 2.5 miles long. It aligns with 2 of the CAC goals, and it has 4 performance measures that need to be reviewed.
As Paki mentioned, this project simply adds 2 more lanes, 1 in each direction, with the project to the west, and continues the widening to ensure it meets capacity needs and demand.
Pretty
John, hold on, I
straightforward.
have a question.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, on the widenings, the main lanes on these interstate stretches, is there any work planned to be included with the frontage roads to bring those up to a better condition and perhaps larger capacity? I've experienced years ago down in El Paso where you had main lanes, you had collector lanes, and you had frontage lanes and such like that. So you had 12 lanes across on some of those freeway sections, and some of these roadways are pretty tight to get through right now. And whether there was any further expansion, for the adjacent roadways is kind of throwing a flag there, rather than getting on the freeway at one ramp and getting off the next one. If you could take the main lane traffic and put it onto frontage roads instead, on a better condition of frontage, whether there was any planning for that.
That's correct. So the main line, the first wave of projects that are coming through that are reconstructing and doing the initial widening, as well as the reconstruction of all the interchanges, there were several of those stages that are going to include also the frontage road work as well. So that exactly what you're describing will happen. When the subsequent stage widenings come through, these last future ones that are added as necessary, those can all take place without disrupting the rest of the system.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Paul, did you already go through yours?
No, not too much to add here. You can see for yourself, there's bridge issues, certainly, and there's congestion issues for future modeled roadway. So certainly things to deal with here. And while the poor things do tend to grab your attention, recognize that each and every project will be looking across this entire performance spectrum to seek opportunities for improvement.
So now we're at the Interstate 10. This is the Kolb Road Express lanes. This is considered a principal arterial project. and it adds lanes on Kolb Road. It's about half a mile long. It aligns with 2 of the CAC goals and has 4 performance measures that need to be addressed.
Now, you recall earlier in the presentation, we were talking about the other components. The 6th Avenue was going to be reconstructed to add additional turning lanes. And I mentioned that the Kolb Road interchange configuration is going to be what's called a diverging diamond, or a DDI interchange. Under future conditions, capacity of the interchange configuration, essentially at that point in time where the growth or the traffic exceeds capacity, this project would add 2 through lanes on Kolb Road to essentially bypass the turning maneuvers that would be trying to get onto the interstate or off the interstate system. So it basically enhances the overall functionality operations of the interchange itself, similar to what we mentioned up at 6th Avenue, but because of the volume, its configuration and layout, obviously a more robust design is necessary.
Existing condition data shows pavement, safety, and congestion issues, existing and future forecast. Recognize that the safety, roadway score or characteristics here are picking up the performance of that particular facility, not the interstate content itself.
Now we're back to the Interstate 10 Alvernon Way to Craycroft Road. This is phase 2 and the second of the final widening phases. It's a little bit over 3 miles in length. It aligns with 2 of the CAC goals, and it has 5 performance measures that need to be addressed.
So exactly as Pocky mentioned, this now just comes back at a future time when the congestion levels warrant it, and adds the 2 additional lanes that are part of the ultimate configuration. If you've been counting at home, you may note that the section basically to the east of Alvernon is anywhere from 6 to 8 to 10 lanes, while the section west of there was more of a 6 and 8 lane combination. Obviously, as you can imagine, that the improvements there at Alvernon, the future connection with SR 210 and converting that into a fully access controlled freeway is going to take a lot of the traffic patterns, habits, changes, and that's going to change how that's done. So the section of lanes reflects what's needed based on volume demands as we model that.
Not too much to add here. You see the performance data of existing condition performance. Rick mentioned congestion issues and reconfiguration. You see that showing up in the existing condition, current roadway modeling, as well as future roadway network, no build condition.
And then again, the Interstate 10 Craycroft Road to Kolb Road, this is the phase 2 of that project. This is the interstate widening to about 2.5 miles in length, aligns with 2 of the CAC goals, and has 4 performance measures that need to be addressed.
And this completes the last piece, the last segment, the last phase, and the last project associated with the overall scope of improvements to I-10 and SR 210.
Just a reminder here that the existing condition sidewalk presence may not be relevant to all of the interstate projects per se. Certainly something to take into consideration and to consider. But again, looking across, you do see some poor performance and some slipping performance across the performance measure spectrum.
Now we're at Interstate 10 Cortero Road traffic interchange. This is an interstate project, and it's about 1 mile long. It aligns with 5 of the CAC goals, and it has 4 performance measures that need to be addressed.
So this one now shifts gears a little bit, and for those of you that have driven I-10, this is very familiar to interchange improvements that you're seeing currently underway, or you have seen in the form of Prince Road, Ruthroff, Ina, where essentially the interchange and the cross street are flip-flopped to provide a great separation over the abutting railroad track that's located just to the east. So Cortero Road interchange is the next one in line. Where Cortero crosses the railroad tracks at grade. This was essentially flip those and Cortero up and over the top. Similar to the configuration that you see all up and down the stretch of I-10.
You do see when you're looking at the existing condition performance data that there are some data gaps here. There's not intersection data available for this project extent, which is in the circle that you see there. But still some good data to consider. One to take note of is the future roadway congestion is modeling poorly with the no build scenario. So something to take into consideration, certainly.
The Interstate 10 Marana Road traffic interchange, another interstate classification, grade separation, about a mile long, aligns with 4 of the CAC goals, and it has 2 performance measures that need to be addressed.
Similar to the previous one in Cortero and what you'll hear coming up on the next couple of projects, these projects are geared at improving the operational situation, conditions, and configuration by eliminating the at-grade railroad crossing that takes place there with the cross street.
Just curious, Rick,
Go ahead, Mr.
this
Chair.
has fewer, or Pocky maybe, this has fewer of our goals addressed than the previous one a couple miles away. Is it because of traffic volumes on the intersecting roads? I guess Cortero obviously has a lot more traffic than Marana, but is that the reason that things like existing roadway box is not checked for this one as opposed to the other one?
This is actually how it was submitted. So as we move through the refinement process, it'll be up to the CAC to determine whether something's lacking or something should not be checked.
Yeah, the initial submittal came in that way, but that allows then for that discussion by the CAC. If you feel that, no, wait a second, it really does address that. As Pocky said, that could be added and those kind of characteristics captured.
Yeah, that'll be part of that homework I mentioned earlier, Tom. Does that help to clarify?
Yeah, I think that's one that I would want to see some further examination of.
Mr. Chair, Brian Keeley.
Go ahead, Brian.
Happy to help on that one too. For someone who lives up in that area, that is a very interesting and unique interchange. And couple in with the neighborhood that's on the east side of that interchange.
Right.
That railroad crossing is the only way in and out. So from a public safety standpoint, if there was an incident that blocked that roadway, it restricts public safety from going in and residents from evacuating out.
Mr. Chair, really great supplemental information there. Recognize that gaps in either alignment with CAC goals or performance data don't necessarily mean that there's not an issue there. So there's certainly performance issues, and there may be CAC goals that could indeed be addressed through the project that may not have shown up just yet.
The Interstate 10 Tangerine traffic interchange, another interstate grade separation, it's a mile long as well, and it meets it's aligned with half of the CAC goals, and it has 4 performance measures that need to be addressed.
Perfectly, as Pocky stated, it's a continuation of the grade separation efforts up there to get the cross streets up and over the railroad tracks to the east.
Recognize here that you are picking up some existing condition intersection data as well as pavement data. And then there may be some sidewalk presence issues that exist. Environmental impact shows up. So that's something that typically will be addressed during the project development itself and all of the NEPA process that the project is required to go through.
The Interstate 10 Moore Road traffic interchange, similar interstate grade separation, a mile long. It aligns with 4 of the CAC goals, and the performance measures, they're not applicable.
Nothing to add from this one. It's continuation of what Pocky's been referencing.
Yeah.
We do see some data gaps in performance measures, but don't let that turn you off. It simply means that we need to hunt a little harder to understand the performance of the existing facilities around that area.
Houghton or Houghton Road, however you want to say it. This is the principal arterial project. It goes from Andrada Polytech High School to Camino del Toro. This is almost 5 miles in length. It is aligned with the majority of the CAC goals, and it has 4 performance measures that need to be addressed.
So after the first day of building all the interstate improvements, now we shift onto the arterial system with the second day. Essentially, this one, as you are aware, the current RTA plan includes for a number of improvements that have either been completed or are underway for everything north of Interstate 10 up to the vicinity of Tanque Verde. And then the interchange improvements, as I mentioned, are under construction. This now starts carrying those improvements down to the south as well to provide that necessary north-south primary corridor connecting all parts of the eastern part of the region.
One day construction of the interstate set makes for nice construction impacts on the Cottonwood, correct? So that's
exactly how we got it through.
Glad you can swing that one. Recognize here that you do see some existing condition performance issues. Where you don't necessarily see it is in the congestion, but recognize that the congestion is looking at existing conditions as well as a no-build scenario. So not necessarily forecasting in what is anticipated to be development patterns in this area within the future congestion ranking that you see here.
We have Ina Road. This is the principal arterial project that goes from the Cañada del Oro Wash to Paseo del Norte. It's 4 miles in length. It aligns with the majority of the CAC goals, and it has 4 performance measures that need to be addressed.
So pretty straightforward, as Paki described. It's one of 2 Ina Road improvements that are proposed, and would essentially take the existing 4-lane roadway and turn it into a 6-lane boulevard with all the necessary appurtenances for intersections, shoulders, pedestrian, and multimodal facilities.
Plenty of existing condition performance issues to choose from here. So looking across the spectrum, you see your pavement is beginning to fall a little bit. There's some intersection safety issues to be addressed, as well as intersection congestion issues. The segment itself is having performance issues, both in existing condition roadway as well as future condition roadway. And then certainly sidewalk presence is something that's been looked at for quite some time up there. So opportunity for improvement there.
The next Ina Road project is also a principal arterial, and it's from I-10 to Camino de la Tierra and the CDO Wash. It's just under 2 miles in length, and it aligns with most of the CAC goals, and it has 4 performance measures to be addressed.
Very similar to the previous project, and obviously this ties into the interchange work that was just recently completed with the reconstruction of the Ina Road interchange. So essentially it's looking at that whole segment all the way up to the vicinity of Northern for improvements, addition of bike ped facilities, and widening enhancements.
Existing condition performance shows some pavement issues beginning here, as well as some safety issues. Certainly congestion we know is continuing to be an issue in this area, and sidewalk presence is ripe for opportunity again.
Next, we have Sabino Canyon Road. This is another principal arterial. It goes from Tanque Verde Road to River Road. It's a reconstruction. It's 1.4 miles in length, aligns with most of the CAC goals, and has, I think, six performance measures, it looks like, that need to be addressed.
One recurring theme you're going to notice through the projects that have been submitted is the tie-in to either previously completed or previously identified RTA projects that so to ensure that system connectivity. Obviously, this project then would take off from the Tanque Verde intersection, which was built as part of the Sabino connection and that was completed not too long ago as part of RTA's current plan, and would essentially continue the widening all the way up to then the vicinity of River Road to provide the necessary capacity and congestion relief through that area. But it's overall tied to the system and projects that have been previously completed is critical to note.
Good point there. Certainly there are existing condition performance issues. You would anticipate that there could be continuing performance issues when you're tying this facility to the adjacent facilities, but certainly a lot to consider here in making a well-rounded project.
Hey, Rick?
Yes, sir.
Is a portion of this segment within the city of Tucson? And would Pima County take responsibility for the implementation?
Lead jurisdiction would be developed or identified at that appropriate time when this project moves forward and is identified its implementation period. I believe the main intersection is within the city limits, but who's the most appropriate lead agency would be determined as we get closer to implementation.
Mm-hmm.
Next, we have the Tangerine Road Connector. This is a minor arterial project, and it goes from Tangerine Road to Sandario Road and McGee Road. It's over 5 miles in length, and it aligns with most of the CAC goals. No performance measures at this point.
Continuing with the theme.
New roadway?
Correct.
Sorry?
That's right.
This is an all new roadway on a new alignment. I'm assuming there would be some environmental impact.
And I'll let Paul talk to that as to the environmental impact aspect of it and how that interfaces with existing conditions. In continuing with the theme of ensuring that the investments that have already been made, and this in particular as it relates to the improvements that have been made up in the northwest side of town, particularly Tangerine Road, and ensuring that we're going to get the lifespan that we anticipated and that we expect. This will provide alternate connectivity, alternate facilities, so that we now can basically ensure that the overall system functionality is fully integrated. We don't wind up relying on just one roadway to carry and serve the bulk of all the traffic. So this makes sure that the investments that have been stretched out so far will continue to last for a very, very, very long time. Paul, if you want to talk about the environmental, though, to the chair's question.
Sure. Mr. Chair, there are environmentally sensitive areas in the area of the project extent, but due to the lack of existing condition data, that's not necessarily shown in your sheet today.
This is Arlen. I have a question. Does this show up on the Marana general plan? Is that in their circulation element?
I do not know personally. I don't know if anybody else does, or that's something we can look into and get back to you.
Yeah, thank you.
The next one is Tangerine Farms Road Extension. This is a major collector classification, and it goes from I-10 traffic interchange to the Clark Farms Road. It's about 1.5 miles long, and it is aligned with 6 of the CAC goals and no performance measures at this point.
Similar to the previous project with the similar benefits, goal, and purpose of providing connectivity, also ensuring that there's alternate facilities to ensure that the longevity of the overall system can be achieved. So this is a brand new connection that's going to go then up to the I-10 area on brand new alignment.
Brand new facility, no existing condition performance data. At first glance, it does not appear to overlap with environmentally sensitive areas, but certainly that'll be looked at as the project would move forward.
The next one is Hardy Road. This was submitted as a minor arterial classification, and it's from La Cañada Drive to Oracle Road. It's 1.5 miles in length, and it is aligned with 5 of the CAC goals, and it has 4 performance measures that need to be addressed.
So this existing stretch of roadway up there is predominantly just a simple little 2-lane roadway, combination of minor or minimal paved shoulders, or in some cases just graded shoulders. No drainage improvements to speak of, but it does have a number of cross-street connections, driveway connections. So obviously the improvements would help improve the overall operations of the area, and the scope of the work of the 3-lane section would meet that future demand.
Existing condition data shows us that there's poor pavement conditions and some safety issues that need to be looked at, certainly, as well as sidewalk presence.
Thornydale Road, minor arterial project. It goes from Cortero Road to Camino del Norte. It's 3.5 miles in length. It is aligned with most of the CAC goals, and it has 6 performance measures that need to be addressed.
So as some of you may recall, or many of you may be familiar with, a number of the improvements that have been made up there in the northwest side of town over the last decade or so include improvements to Thornydale, McGee, and Cortero, as well as Tangerine Road. So this continues with that theme of connectivity, making sure that the new improvements then are connected with the second round of improvements or complementary pieces to ensure the overall effectiveness is maximized.
6 performance measures to be addressed. Existing condition, we'll leave it at that. Plenty to choose from.
Valencia Road, another minor arterial classification from Camino de la Tierra to Mission Road. This is about 1.25 miles long, aligns with most of the CAC goals, and has 7, it looks like, performance measures that need to be addressed.
So the improvement projects associated with the 97 bond that improved the segment from Mission Road to I-10 and widened it out to 6 lanes. This essentially goes further west, addressing both capacity, operational, multimodal needs from Camino de la Tierra now to Mission Road, and ensuring that all that section is brought up to full standards and meets current demands and operational needs.
Plenty of existing condition issues going on in this project extent, and looks like there's a need for attention there.
Orange Grove Road, segment 1. This is a minor arterial project, and it's one of 2 segments. This one's from La Cholla Boulevard to Oracle Road. It's about 1.5 miles long. It aligns with most of the CAC goals, and it has 3 performance measures that need to be addressed.
As you've heard me mention a number of times, this ties in with other system improvements that have been made at La Cholla, as well as those that have been made at La Cañada, and we'll continue that forward on the section of Orange Grove that remains to be addressed. That small gap you see in the middle reflects that the improvements at that intersection where it crosses La Cañada were made under the La Cañada widening project several years ago.
Leading to that, you see no score or no indication for intersection safety because the project extent does not grab that particular intersection. So recognizing again that indication of performance is not the end all be all of the project needs. It gives you a guide and a place to start on where to look a little bit deeper.
And then there's Orange Grove Road, segment 2. Same minor arterial project. It goes from Oracle Road to Skyline Drive. It's about 2 miles in length. It's aligned with most of the CAC goals, and it has a lot of performance measures that need to be addressed.
As Poppy described, this perfectly lines up with the previous segment and continues the improvements all the way over to the Skyline connection. It was approved as part of the old 97 bond package approximately 15 years ago. So ensures that that side of town has adequate east-west capacity across multiple corridors, as well as then intersection improvements to ensure maximal operations.
Highly utilized corridor already, and existing condition performance data kind of plays that out.
Pandaria Road is next. It's another minor arterial classification. It goes from Abra Valley Road to Imai Road, I believe it's pronounced. So widening, it's about 2.5 miles long. It aligns with most of the RCAC goals, and it has 3 performance measures that need to be addressed.
So the existing roadway on this particular stretch is predominantly a 2-lane roadway with a stop control at Twin Peaks. And this would bring it into full upgrades associated with the 4-lane, all the necessary appurtenances to address multimodal, and then the intersection improvements plus any turning lanes necessary for enhanced operations is called out.
So while you may not see congestion issues arising in the existing condition performance data, you do see pavement issues as well as roadway safety issues. So still some things to consider in this project.
Rancho Vistosa Boulevard is next, another minor arterial from Moore Road to Tangerine Road, 1.5 miles in length, aligns with 5 of our CAC goals and has 3 performance measures to be addressed.
So this project is the existing roadway is well over 20 years old, was built part of the original development. And so the project proposes to basically reconstruct it to ensure it can meet the traffic demands, the volumes that are out there, and still provide all the necessary lane configuration, multimodal facilities in the form of sidewalks, as well as pedestrian and multi-use facilities.
So existing condition performance data shows some safety issues there, as well as some sidewalk presence, recognizing that while maintenance of pavement is not poor at this point, staying ahead of that is always advisable.
Irvington Road, a minor arterial from Ajo Highway to Mission Road. This is over about 5.5 miles in length, aligns with most of the CAC goals, and has 5 performance measures to be addressed.
Similar with some of the other big corridors you've been seeing, the improvements out on Valencia Road have provided a nice companion piece. The improvements to SR 86 that have recently been completed ensure that that facility is operating. And now this one has been identified to connect directly to SR 86 through an appropriate intersection configuration, as well as then provide a variety of improvements to predominantly a 2-lane roadway. There are sections of 3-lane, but they have minimal pedestrian facilities, bike facilities. Plus, there would need to be some intersection reconfigurations out there to address the overall traffic mobility, throughput capability, and overall operations.
Hey, Pocky. As we're getting close to the end of our 2-hour window here, and we're also getting close to the end of the minor arterials in our grouping, I'd like to suggest to the committee that we allow the RTA staff to complete these minor arterials. So 4 more of these projects before we adjourn. And that'll be maybe a nice breaking point for us as we then get into the majors.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
With everyone? Very good, thanks.
Thank you, Mr.
Right.
Chair. Not too much to add on the performance measure side. It kind of speaks for itself. Certainly pavement, intersection safety, as well as roadway safety are focus areas, as well as.
Kima Mine Road, minor arterial from I-19 on Nogales Highway, almost 2.5 miles in length, aligns with almost all of the CAC goals but 1, and has 5 performance measures to be addressed.
So as Pocky mentioned, this is a roadway that connects I-19, then goes over to the Nogales Highway. Straightforward 4-lane widening to ensure the proper number of lanes for capacity and congestion reduction, as well as then all the other necessary appurtenances for multimodal functionality.
Existing condition data shows pavement issues arising. You got some bridge issues there, and then safety certainly needs some closer attention as the project is considered.
Alvernon Way, minor arterial from Aerospace Parkway to Valencia Road. This is a reconstruction about 1.5 miles in length. It is aligned with 5 of the CAC goals and has 1 performance measure that needs to be addressed.
So this is a continuation of several of the improvements and ties in with, as I mentioned, some of the improvements that have been done to Valencia, as well as then project efforts to the south that have been done under separate efforts. There's a little gap you see in there. We had noticed that as staff ourselves. And so that would be part of the ongoing discussion with the TMC, CAC to refine that and identify how that needs to be connected so that the overall facility has full functional connectivity.
Indeed, you see some existing condition performance data showing up. Bringing the project extent to include the gap would certainly show differently there, but lots to consider.
And I think we have one more, right, Tom? Let's see. Nogales Highway from Calle Valle Verde to Sahuarita Road. This is 3.3 miles in length, aligns with all but one CAC goal, and has 3 performance measures to be addressed.
So this project would essentially start with the intersection improvements that were done in White House Canyon Continental area, and would continue the improvements all the way to match into Sahuarita Road, and where the 4-lane section has been built out as part of as part of previous and past projects.
So here's
Just
a,
one more.
please.
Go
So
ahead,
here's
Paul.
an example. Existing condition performance data may not tell the whole story of the project. So there are needs out there, certainly. You may not see it perfectly clearly when you look across the performance spectrum, but there are certainly needs in certain areas and emerging ones as well.
Okay, and the final minor arterial is the 36th Street overpass. This is a reconstruction from 36th Street, on 36th Street from 4th Avenue to Park Avenue. It's only about a quarter mile in length, and it aligns with all but 3 of the CAC goals, and it has 1 performance measure to be addressed.
In addition to the bike lane sidewalk, the multimodal facility, the big thing that would be included with this is the grade separation over the rail line that runs down to the Nogales port of entry.
So where you see no existing bridge conditions, there will be some that come up with the grade separation circle. A facility to be taken care of.
Very good. Thank you all for the presentations. Paki, you talked about homework. I'm wondering if these data sheets that we've been seeing here can be made available to the committee before we meet again, so that a little bit of that homework could be advanced reading, if you will.
Okay, I will follow up on that, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Any comments from, oh, go ahead, Paul, sorry.
Sorry, Tom. Just a few clarifications along the way that have come in related to some of the questions that we've received. So I misspoke in saying that the Houghton project doesn't take into consideration future growth. It does. It doesn't take into consideration the newly built facility, and the future growth may not look exactly the way that others may anticipate. It's the way that we model it. So certainly some stuff to be considered there. And then in addition to that, the Craycroft TI project does have good sidewalk presence because there are sidewalks in the underpass that are showing as complete. So that brings that project up to a good sidewalk presence rating. And then lastly, what we're looking at is the Tangerine west of I-10 does not currently show up in the general plan unless it is an expansion of an existing piece, but we would have to defer to Marana for that one. So bear in mind that it might be in there, but we're not seeing it as explicitly as we look at the general plan.
Okay, good. Thanks for those clarifications. Any comments or questions from the committee before we adjourn?
Mr. Chair, this is
Carolyn?
I'm sorry,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair, this is Farhad. If you don't mind, I do want to remind us to talk about the homework as well.
Right.
Mr.
So
Chair,
the homework
this is Carolyn.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Well, mine's just an announcement. You can go ahead, Paki. I'm sorry.
No, I mentioned the homework assignment. You did receive in your packet the CAC goals spelled out with the alignment. These were the ones that were submitted. So the homework will be following up on what you heard today and looking to review to see if there's anything missing, if you need to add anything, and then start looking ahead at the remainder of the presentation to see if you have any questions or concerns about the CAC goals and alignment to the goals for the projects you didn't hear about.
Good.
And one
Thank
more
you.
comment before we move on, Mr. Chair. So I believe the question regarding Marana's general plan, that the response is yes, it is included in the general plan.
Yes.
Very good. All right, Carolyn.
Yes, I just, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to let everyone know that we have another transit subcommittee meeting scheduled. And I know there are people that wanted to attend. We've only had one meeting, so you're not really behind. But I'm not sure who this email went out to, but if you are interested in our transit subcommittee, we're meeting on Monday, August 24th at 11 a.m. And if you missed the first meeting but want to be involved with that, just let Pocky know and she'll get you the instructions. Thank you.
Good, thanks for that. Anything else from the committee? Very good. Thanks everyone for your attention and for a good turnout today. And we'll see you at the next one. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.